Joining us again for another episode of Campfire. And this time it's a very, very special episode for many reasons. It's the first time we have three guests on the show, and not anyone's guest. We have three very inspirational women, also happen to be Googlers, that are joining us today to talk about their journey into tech, as well as the program that they're part of, Women in Tech. And so I'm really thrilled to have you all three. Would you mind actually starting by short introductions? Let's start with you, Sequoyah. What do you do at Google? Where are you dialing in from? And maybe a few words about the program Women in Tech.
Sure. So, hi everyone. I'm Sequoyah Patrick. I am the global lead of the Women Techmakers program. I'm dialing in from Atlanta, Georgia. Recently transferred here from New York City. And a little bit about the program. So, Women Techmakers is really focused on building community visibility and resources so that all women can thrive in the tech space. Because there's so much research that demonstrates the importance of community, the importance of giving, resources for women to succeed, and the importance of seeing like visible role models that look like you so that you too feel like you have a place and that you belong. So that's what our program is all about.
Awesome, thank you. And I think we do have role models here today on the show, so I'm really happy with that. Chryssa, do you want to introduce yourself next?
Sure. Aloha, everyone. My name is Chryssa Jones, and I am calling in from Hawaii, north shore of Oahu. And I'm actually not with Google, but I am with Nucamp, and I'm excited that I am part of the team as the director of curriculum with Nucamp. So it's great to be with you. I am invited, or I am a participant with Women Techmakers and a chapter leader in our local Google developers group here on Oahu. So I'm happy to be able to talk a little bit about the space of community development work that we're doing here in Hawaii.
That's awesome. Anyone interested in joining the Google group in Hawaii would probably want to reach out to you, right? I guess.
Yes, please.
That's awesome. And how about you, Caitlin?
Yeah, so my name is Caitlin Morrissey. I am the global lead of our Women Techmakers Ambassador program. So we're thrilled to have Chryssa as a part of that program. The Ambassador program specifically really focuses on helping to empower leaders in the tech space. So we have amazing women and allies from all around the world who focus on hosting events, speaking at events, being a visible role model, creating content and mentoring others to really help us get closer to a world where we have gender equity in tech. And so very excited to be here with you all and have this conversation today.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. And I want to remember anyone who's watching the stream, and if you're watching, you're probably either on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook, that you can ask your questions to Sequoyah, Chryssa, or Caitlin at any time. You go on the chat, you say hi, and you ask your questions, and we'll actually make sure that we answer them live. I want to ask a little bit about the Women in Tech program. Caitlin, you mentioned the ambassador community. And Sequoyah, you're looking after all communities in the program. Can you help the audience understand, who those two communities are, the ambassadors versus everyone else, and also the sheer size of your community? I was personally very impressed by the number of people, the activities really that you're bringing together, the footprint geographically as well. Do you mind diving into that a little bit?
Sure. So I'll talk about like the two, and then I'll let Caitlin dive into the ambassador program since that's
awesome
that she manages. So yeah, we have two main programs for Women Techmakers. So we have an ambassador program that's comprised of about 1,600 ambassadors a day. We just actually onboarded 500 additional ones, or we will be in the next couple of weeks. So really excited about that. And then we also have a membership program. So our ambassador program is a program where it's a lot more hands-on, and we really like focus on those women as leaders, and it's an application process. And then our membership program, we have 80,000 members today in over 190 countries. Anyone can sign up. It's totally free. You get a newsletter once a month with ambassador activities, things about our Women Techmakers program, really cool things that are happening at Google in like the cloud or Android space. And we offer a lot of access to like some of our Google events and like PA functions, like IO or Cloud Next. So there's a little bit of giving on that end too, but our ambassador program is definitely our bread and butter. So Caitlin, I'll let you kind of explain that one a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have touched on it a bit and happy to go a little bit deeper. But yeah, we really view, like I said, ambassadors as leaders and sort of experts within their tech communities. Ambassadors this year, I think, have hosted over 500 events, spoken at over 800 different events, reaching hundreds of thousands of people. So it is a definitely global reach and really big impact that all of these women and allies do have as ambassadors. And really by being part of the ambassador program, we really try and provide value for ambassadors. You know, we're asking them to go out into their communities, to talk about technologies, to share their stories. And in return, we want to help them. So we really think of the ambassador program, as Sequoyah mentioned, it is an application program, so it is a little bit exclusive. But once you're a part of the program, you are opened up to this global network of women around the world. We're at about 2,000 now with that extra 500 that we added. We have exclusive learning and development opportunities, whether it's like train the trainer. So we work really closely with the I'm Remarkable team at Google on helping our ambassadors with that workshop, which really focuses on claiming all of the things that you're great at in the world. And we also partner with a lot of our Google technologies as well to kind of help level up their skills. So always looking for ways to help our ambassadors be better ambassadors, better leaders, but also to help them succeed in their careers.
That's great. And so anyone can be a member. Like if you're really interested in joining the community, you can become a member. I'm assuming there's some requirements to becoming an ambassador. Is there a path? And I guess I have one question. Do you have to have tech skills to become a Women in Tech ambassador? Is that part of the requirement? Or do you just have an interest in joining the tech world?
Yeah, so for the ambassador program specifically, we do focus more on women with some sort of role already in technology. One of the things that we also look for is an impact that they're already making in their community. We, of course, want to help ambassadors to get even better at organizing events or helping them with their public speaking skills, but we do look to see that they're already doing those types of things in their community. So I would definitely say it's sort of a path to do that is to just start getting active in your community, right? Like start to speak, and even if it's at a tiny little event or, you know, you're hosting something internally for your company, but just start to kind of bring together community and create these opportunities for yourself to start building up these skills so that you have kind of the background and the skills necessary to be a part of the program.
That's awesome. Chryssa, do you want to, I mean, you are an ambassador for Hawaii. Do you want to talk about your experience joining the program and what you did actually to get into the program and what you've been doing so far for your community?
Yeah, thank you. So when I first learned about Women Techmakers, which was in late 2019, early 2020, I really felt like this was an organization that I really wanted to be part of because I identify as a Native Hawaiian woman, and I know that not only are women underrepresented in technology, but so are Hawaiians. And I felt like, you know, this is really an opportunity for me to help grow my community as a Hawaiian woman. And so I was excited to apply for and join Women Techmakers. Here in Hawaii, though, we didn't have a Google community that I could kind of latch onto and leverage with Women Techmakers. So I ended up launching our Google developers community here so that I could also be a Women Techmakers ambassador, kind of wearing both roles, as I know that many other women do too. But I'm grateful for the opportunity to be able to be in this position and represent my community and help bring additional resources into my community so that we could grow those opportunities for women and for developers here in Hawaii.
All right, that's awesome. All right, so that's thank you for the overview of the program. This is one of the program at Google that's really partnering as well with us on bringing coding training and coding bootcamp to aspiring developers. So I'm grateful to have that partnership as well. Um, Now that we've covered the program, I would love to talk a little bit more about your personal journey into tech, and how ultimately you got into Google, or for you, Chryssa, how you got to Nucamp, or maybe before that, um, because that's very much something that our community and everyone looking at those role models are wondering, like, how do I go from where I am today to that kind of dream job or position in a tech company. Um, Maybe starting with you, Sequoyah, would you mind telling us what did you study at first? Like, what was your premises? I will say, what were you studying for, and then how did that relate to where you are right now, and what were the steps in between?
Yeah, for sure. So I went to Auburn University. I studied industrial and systems engineering. I was always really interested in like problem solving, and that's kind of what industrial engineers do. It's also always it's about like process efficiencies and finding those in situations and in projects. But what I didn't realize is that most industrial and systems engineers worked in manufacturing facilities. So I did a few internships there. You actually had to start off actually working on the line. Nothing against manufacturing facilities, but that I knew that just wasn't where I wanted to be in my career. I am a girly girl. I love to dress up. I couldn't do that there. What I did notice while I was there is that a lot of the leadership that were engineers and had an engineering background also had business degrees. So I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to stay at Auburn a little while longer. I'm going to get my business degree. I was a cheerleader at the time as well, and I wanted to keep cheering, which worked out because we won the national championship that year, and you could cheer in grad school. So I went on, got my MBA, and did another internship at KPMG, actually one of the big four accounting firms. But after school, ended up working at AT&T in telecommunications. So I wasn't really an engineer there, but was able to take those skills that I had learned in my internships along the way and what I had learned in school and really use those transferable skills. And I was a project manager in our cloud space. And so I did that for about 4 years. I had a really good friend who sat behind me, who actually got a job at Google. And I was like, you have to bring me with you. And so I ended up getting a job at Google because they were also hiring telecom people pretty heavily at the time. So I started off in Google Fiber as a project manager. Then the engineering department needed help. So then I became an outside plant engineer for a little while, which was nothing to do with my background, but it was really cool to just be able to like still flex those skills. I think there were still transferable skills there as well. There was a lot of learning. Then I went back more into program management, went into the Chrome enterprise space. And then I was like, you know what? I really want to work on something that's a little bit more like meaningful and impactful. So I came across the Women Techmakers role, still a program manager, not a developer, but it's really cool because I get to kind of take that engineering background and like being able to have those conversations with developers, but not necessarily being a developer, which I don't think is truly needed in the tech space. I know that's kind of what people think today, but I think me, Caitlin, and a lot of other program managers and marketers and finance people in big tech companies like Google prove that that's not necessarily the case.
That's very interesting. You've highlighted a few things that I'd like to kind of go back to with you.
Yeah.
First, you talked about the industry. You actually moved into Google because of connections in the industry, from telecom to telecom.
Yep.
And that's actually something we tell aspiring developers or career shifters a lot. Your current job may not be super appealing to you or doesn't pay enough, but your industry is critical because you're accumulating knowledge that you can actually trade as you actually move companies.
Right.
If you're in hospitality, chances are you're going to find a tech job in hospitality and things like that.
Exactly.
How much was it actually critical for you to have that industry knowledge to get into Google? Like, did you know someone at Google? I mean, you mentioned a friend, but were there like a network? Did you have?
Yeah, I mean, that
place?
For sure. I think that's when I realized in my career the power of networking and how important that is. Like it's good to be really good at your job and understand understand your industry, but it's also equally as important to make those connections. And that's why I also love the work we're doing now, because it's all about community and building those connections. So for me, I think the first in with Google was just knowing the right people. But I think once I knew them, it was kind of on me to be able to sell myself and the work that I knew, and to be able to interview well, and to show that I had learned something at AT&T that I could pull over. But I hear you. I think the same thing. Like even when I was in the Chrome space, so I was on the sales team, and I noticed that we had different industries that we targeted, right? And so many of my teammates were like, oh, I came from healthcare and now I'm selling technology to healthcare industries, or I came from finance and now I'm selling, technology to finance companies, because you do have that subject matter expertise. So it's not necessarily that you have to start at a big tech company, but it's, leveraging those skills, those transferable skills, that industry knowledge of wherever you're coming from, and you can definitely make the move.
That makes sense. And then the other thing is, and I've noticed that on your LinkedIn profile, the acronym PMP. For those of you who don't know, what does PMP stand for?
Project management professional. So like I mentioned, I started at AT&T as a project manager.
Yeah.
I am a program manager now. And so it was really important at AT&T to have a PMP, and to go on to any other project management position. So I've been keeping it up. We don't use it as much at Google, or I don't think it's as highly looked at as Google as it is in some other industries, but who knows if I ever need to make a shift, or, I think it's really good skills, and I continue my learning with it as well. And I think I can kind of use those learnings in my day to day.
No, that's right. And that's that's a highly regarded certification, right? You really have to study, you pass an exam to actually have the title PMP. And it's one of those transferable skills as well. Just like industry, you can be a PMP in any type of jobs.
Exactly.
And that's something that can definitely help as well to round, your profile, I would say. Well, thank you very much, Sequoyah, for sharing that. Who would like to go next? Caitlin or Chryssa, you want to share a little bit about your journey?
Sure, I'm happy to jump in. I do not have a technical background. I will just start with that. I actually went to school. I went to UCLA. I'm originally from the Bay Area. I grew up in Berkeley, and then went to UCLA for college, and I studied communications there. So my focus was on mass communications, about media studies, a lot of different types of psychology and things along those lines. But to be totally honest, I really kind of had no idea what I was doing at that point. I did not have some sort of grand plan of like, all right, once I have my communication studies major, then I will do blank, I was in LA at the time. So obviously there's a lot of like the entertainment business. I knew that was not something. I didn't like LA. I like LA more now, but I'm a Bay Area girl at heart. So I wanted to come back to the Bay Area. And of course, tech is really big here. But I was really just unsure what I wanted to do after I graduated. And so one of the things that I actually did, that was a hard decision to make, but it's a decision I'm super happy I made and really like proud of myself for making, is that I decided to take a year off. My friends and I got together and we were like, you know what, we just want to travel. We just want to take some time and see the world. And so after I graduated, I moved back home. I started working at a restaurant as a server. And actually, when I was a server, getting ready, saving money, I ran into somebody that I went to college with. I was waiting on her, and she had mentioned, hey, Google, I'm at Google now. Google loves people who travel. Hit me up when you get back. And I was like, yeah, okay. Kind of put that in the back of my mind. Went to South America for about 4 months. It was amazing. I could spend the rest of this time talking about that trip and how just incredible it was. I won't, but I will just say it was a really great opportunity to kind of just get outside of my own experience, meet a lot of different people from all different types of backgrounds, feel uncomfortable in a lot of different types of situations and sort of get through them. And when I came back, I was in debt. So started working at the restaurant again and just started putting my application out. And again, at that point, I kind of really was just sort of putting it to as many places as I could think of. And I did ultimately get hired as a receptionist at a tech company. And I had also reached back out to the friend. I had given her my resume. And about 3 months into working at as a receptionist, I get a call on my phone from a 650 number. So I'm like, oh, it's somebody needing some information at the company. And it was Google. And a few interviews later, I had landed a job at Google. And I've been here at Google for the past 10 years. So really kicked off kind of my experience. But I started in customer support. So 5 hours a day, I was on the phone helping people with their Google AdWords account, getting yelled at a lot. And, it was not the most glamorous job by any means, but it got my foot in the door. I transferred after about 2.5 years. I got a job at YouTube. And this was just something that I applied to internally. So outside of kind of the referral that I got ultimately to get into YouTube, all of the moves I've made within Google, I actually haven't sort of known people on the team. And so I definitely feel like your network is very important, but at the same time, your expertise, your background, the things that you're working on can also speak wonders for you and open up doors for you. So I was at YouTube for about 4 or 5 years. And then about 3 years ago, I came over to the Women Techmakers team, where I have kind of gone into a couple different roles. I initially came on to run all of our events. That was at the end of 2019. And so very quickly into my tenure at the Women Techmakers team, the world shut down with COVID. And so there were no longer events, and have had to do a number of sort of pivots even within this team. But for the past about 1.5 years now, I would say, I've been running the ambassador program, and it's just been amazing. A really inspiring and empowering community to be a part of. And I am very happy where I'm at now, but I could have never, 10 years ago, I would have never had any clue that I would be where I am today.
That's amazing. I have plenty of questions, but I want to start with this one. Are you going to be able to travel again and visit all the ambassadors all around the world or not?
I would love that. Can we make sure that Sundar hears this?
How's the Jenny budget? Yeah. How about that?
Yeah. I mean, that's, I think, been one of the coolest things at YouTube as well. I was working on creator events, and I got the opportunity to travel a decent amount and get to see people in person. And I think that's been, in both of these jobs, one of the most rewarding things. I think a lot of times for us, especially in tech, you're always at a computer, you're answering emails, you're on Hangouts all the time, but actually getting to meet people in person and getting that connection. Chryssa and I had the amazing opportunity to meet each other a couple of weeks ago. And it's just oh, wow, this is why I'm doing this. This is why I'm answering an email or doing some annoying process and getting approvals on this. It's this is the community that I'm working for. So I would love to be able to, I'll get a ticket around the world and try and see as many people as I
can. So going back though, and I wish that's going to happen for you, but going back to how you started and your year sabbatical break, and then getting a job and kind of grinding at it, you must have something, right? An edge or someone who's actually going through that type of experience and thinking about, okay, how do I get hired at Google after traveling for a year and being employed as a receptionist? What do you think made the difference for you? And what will be your advice to someone who feels like, they're in the same spot? They're there, they have huge dreams, but reality doesn't necessarily match those dreams. How do you get that job? How do you get the interview? How do you get the job? Do you think there's a kind of formula here that you could share with us?
Oh man, if there was a formula, I would love that. I think it was a combination of things. I mean, throughout my educational experience, I always really strive to do really well. And so when I did graduate, my GPA was pretty high, and going from college straight into a job, that's kind of one of the things that they're looking at, right? Like if you're a few years out of college, I think your GPA is it doesn't really matter anymore. But for me specifically at that time, I'd had a few internships here and there, and I do think that those helped. You know, I had actually worked at an advertising agency for 2 years over the summer. And it was, one of them was actually in the building that I work at now at Google, in downtown San Francisco. So it kind of feels full circle in that way as well. But I don't know. I think that the referral helped. So again, sort of going back to that network, you kind of have somebody vouching for you. And I think a little bit of luck, to be honest, you know, right place, right time. And I think that, you know, the combination of the skills that I had built and the experience that I showed, plus that GPA, I think all kind of magically got me that interview. And then I also think the interview itself, I felt really good about all of the interviews I had. That was through a lot of practice. I was on the phone with this girl who referred me for about 2 or 3 hours leading up to it. And she was sort of grilling me on these different questions. And she was saying, hey, you know, I think you should phrase this that way. Or I do remember freezing up when they asked me, who's Google's biggest competition? And I could not think of anyone. I really don't even remember what I said. And I remember being like, oh, that's it. But outside of that, everything went okay. But it did take a lot of practice as well. So I would definitely say for interviews, the more practice, the better.
Yeah, practice, network, with a bit of luck.
Yeah.
I just want to ask the audience, because by now we should have tons of questions and I see just nothing, which is so weird. And I'm like, is something not working here? So if anyone hears us, type in something, or maybe I want to know if we have something in our Slack that says, hey, we're trying to chat, but nobody's answering or anything. Anyway, so let me know if you're seeing anything. Show us, like, say hi. Well, there you go. Yes. All right. Well, you guys are all quiet today. Look at that. Okay. Well, you are welcome. You are actually probably listening to every word that we're saying, but please feel free to ask any question you may have to our guest, and see if that can help. So, last but not least, obviously, Chryssa, we're so glad to have you on board. You've joined us. It's like 3 weeks ago now, but you've been with Nucamp for about 2 years, teaching with us from Hawaii. You have also a very, I would say, diverse background, and you didn't necessarily start in tech at all. Do you mind sharing that with us? And everything
Sure.
that really brought you so close to Google, to education as well, and really why you're here today.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So I've always been a technophile, but you're right. I'd never worked in tech before. I actually, my educational background is in business. I have a bachelor's degree, and then I went on to a master's degree in business. And I never could really decide what I wanted to do when I grew up, but grandpa always said I could get a job if I got a degree in business or education, and I did not want to do anything with education. So I went into business, ironically. And so I did, with my degree, I worked at different places. I did some work in community development here in Hawaii for a while. I did some work in small business, and ultimately I ended up working in higher education, which is kind of funny because I didn't think I wanted to go into education, but I had an opportunity and I went into higher education, first with Hawaii Pacific University here, and then later with the University of California system. And when I worked in education, my area of expertise was really focusing on non-traditional students, working adults, and then military veterans and military dependents. And on a broader scale, just underrepresented communities and non-traditional students in general. And I really, in the work that I did there, I was really focusing on what makes students successful. What does success look like for a non-traditional student? And how is that different from a traditional path college student? And what are some of the things that we can do as an institution to help students be more successful? What are the things that are preventing them from being successful, and that kind of stuff. So that was really my area of expertise. And I spent a number of years in that career, and I got pretty good at it. Actually, I love that work. But at some point, I started asking myself, is this what I want to spend the rest of my career doing? I like this, but I never planned to go into this in the first place. And so I had an opportunity to think about, if I'm going to be intentional about the rest of my career, what do I want to spend it doing? And my husband talked me into looking at a coding boot camp. He says, "You're always good with computers, and engineers make a lot of money. You should do that instead." So I thought about it. It was really scary, to be honest. Coding boot camps back then were really expensive. There weren't a whole lot of options out there. And, I was working full time. I was raising a family, and I wasn't sure if I was even going to like being a developer. I didn't know what a developer even does professionally. And I couldn't really see myself getting a tech job because I thought that tech jobs had to be at tech companies like,
Mhm.
Microsoft or Google or Facebook or whatever. And I didn't think that people that work at those companies look like me. So I didn't know how I would fit in. So that was really scary. I had a lot of support. My family was very supportive. So I jumped in, and I just didn't know where it was going to take me, where I was going to end up. Fortunately, when I finished the boot camp, I was very, very, very blessed to have an opportunity working as a web developer for an educational company here in Hawaii.
What are
And
the odds?
I know, I didn't even know that jobs like that existed. Cause like I said, I was applying at tech companies. I wasn't looking in education because I didn't know that there are tech jobs in education. Now I know. So now I tell everybody, hey, there are tech jobs everywhere, not just in tech companies. And that's like a big part of my platform now, is letting people know that there are opportunities everywhere. So my first job was in education here in Hawaii, worked at Kamehameha schools. I was part of a small team. We built amazing apps and leverage technologies that are helping teachers to normalize education, culture-based education, and Hawaiian language, which was very meaningful to me, being able to work in this community. And I did that for a number of years. And then I had an opportunity to join Nucamp as working with curriculum, which is great because I love curriculum. I love teaching. I started teaching for Nucamp at the beginning of the pandemic, actually, because I wanted to be a better developer. And I fully believe that teaching it will force you to be better at it. And it pushed me out of my comfort zone. So I started teaching so that I could get better at my code as a developer. And I started I joined Women Techmakers so that I could build that network, because I was really starting from the ground up. I had a huge network in a totally different field. So I needed to start networking now in the tech field and start building those connections. So Women Techmakers, Women Who Code, other organizations like that really helped me kind of get started on that path and show me what those options were. So when I came back to Nucamp now as full-time director of curriculum, that feels like full circle for me to be back in education on the administration side and being able to influence coding boot camps for a lot of other people now. So that's really exciting for me.
And we are really blessed to have you with us for so long and in that new capacity as well. I want to say hi to the community who's showed up. Thank you for responding to my call. Hello, Rachel. Great to have you. Sirius, great to have you as well. I mean, too busy listening to great stories. Okay, I understand that. Your excuse for not asking all those questions. Hey, Chryssa. And then Krista, sorry. And then I want to piggyback on what you just said, Chryssa, because I think this question is very much a question for an educator. Must one be technical, or must one learn technical? And the way I really internalize and interpret that is, I mean, is there a path to just become technical overnight, or do you have to learn and start from zero pretty much and then become one? As an educator, Chryssa, how do you think about broaden acquiring technical skills? What does it look like? And can one wake up and all of a sudden be great at algorithms and data structures, or do we have to learn it?
Well, nobody wakes up overnight and is an expert in anything. It always takes time. But One thing I learned in my journey that surprised me is how transferable the skills that I gained in my previous work were to my new career paths. I didn't think that there would be that much overlap. Obviously, there is because it was both in education, but I also had skills working with data analytics because I did that in my job as an educator to make sure that the programs we were doing were effective. I had skills in communication and in strategic planning and in uh, team building and program leadership and all of those things that applied to my tech job. So when I made that career change, I didn't have to start at the very bottom. I
Mhm.
already had all of this experience as a professional that just applied directly to my new job with the new layer of technical skills that I learned through education. So I think that's really the sweet spot for a lot of career changers is to look at where your passions lie, where your expertise already is, and then what new skills do you need to pick up through formal training to get you to the next step in your journey.
Yeah, that's great. Great
If I
point.
could just jump in on
Yeah.
that question, because I'm going to take it a little existential, because when I read, like, must one be technical, and kind of interpreting that through my lens of women tech makers, I also think that there's like, and Chryssa sort of mentioned this a bit, I think there's we all have this sort of picture of what it means to work in tech. A lot of people might think of somebody coding, furiously coding on their computer late at night. Maybe they're wearing a hoodie. Oftentimes it's a man. And so I think that I would also just like to say that, like, tech is very diverse in the opportunities and like the ways that you can be technical and what being technical sort of looks like. And I think that's one of the things that was also really surprising to me, who did not come from a technical background. I was always sort of interested in math, not so much science, but I liked problem solving, all of those things. And I never really thought that, like, I didn't make the connection between sort of problem solving and tech. And I think that there's a lot of people that miss out potentially on exploring more in tech, or sort of thinking more about a career in tech because they think they're not technical. But I really don't think that that is something, if it's at all interesting to you, if something about technology seems kind of cool, you don't have to be this super, super technical, like math whiz, science whiz type of person. There's a lot of different opportunities, of course, to learn and grow those skills, but to sort of express and be a part of the industry in a lot of different ways.
That's great. Thank you, Caitlin. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the audience thinks and simplifies, and the industry and the news, it's all about that developer, and that's the only way to get a job in tech. But there's so much more. You have experience in advertising and using Google Ads. You mentioned. I mean, it's pretty technical to manage a Google Ads account, and there's a ton of actually tech involved. That actually, I mean, there's certifications to actually be a good Google Ad person, and so that's one path. I please go and ask your questions, and I see one from Juan here. And actually, let's bring it up, and then I have another question regarding the program Techmaker, and we'll go there next. So Juan is asking, does the Women Techmaker program offer workshops or programs in non-technical topics? And I think we kind of touched that a little bit earlier. Yeah.
Yes.
One of our instructors, by the way, is a good friend of Nucamp and students.
Yeah, I mean, I think we definitely do. And I think that that's something that is really important as well, is that it's also not just about the technical skills in order to be successful in tech. There's a lot about communicating. There's a lot about collaborating. There's a lot about negotiating. And so we really try and touch on a number of those. Sometimes they're called soft skills. Sometimes we like to call them applied skills. But I think that those are things, and especially for women in tech, sometimes there's a lot of complexity when you think about communicating as a woman in tech, that may be also different from how men sort of approach conversations. And so we try and offer technical content, but also really to help build those skills, because they are oftentimes equally important, if not sometimes more important, especially depending on kind of where you are in the industry.
Very often, the big difference between a successful graduate and a less successful graduate of a coding bootcamp is going to be around those soft skills. It's going to be about how well do you engage in a mentorship connection? How well do you respond to an interview or someone who's going to recruit you for a particular job? And so, yeah, those trainings are super important. We see that as well. The question I have for you is very. I think it's kind of the what you've learned with the program and through the audience, 80,000 people across 180 countries. What do you hear from your audience in terms of wins that you're seeing happening in the field for women joining the tech world or women getting into tech? What are the challenges that you're seeing right now happening in that space? And the question I have for you is, are those universal? I mean, you have a very diverse community of women in tech, 180 countries. Do you see significant, drastic differences in challenges and wins or opportunities based on geo, for example, or industries? We've talked about industries. What kind of insights do you have from that community? Challenges, wins, and is it universal?
Yeah, I think I'll start maybe with the challenges. I think it's often just a challenge in general, especially when you are like developers, and that's what most of our community is that sometimes they are the only ones in the room. And so that can be intimidating for women a lot of times. So going back to those applied skills, outside of teaching them technology, we also want to teach them to be more confident in those spaces, to be able to be better speakers on stage, because we often also see that like women won't go to an event unless they see women on the panel. So we had a program called Women Developer Academy. So we were teaching these technical women to develop these really impactful speeches on stage on whatever topic that they chose. And we saw wins from them as like, hey, I did this. I had this mentor. I delivered this speech. It turned into me landing a role. And now I'm way more confident to be able to do that. So that's what makes this work really exciting and really impactful. And that's what we want to continue to do more of.
Yeah. And I'd say challenges, I would say there's those universal challenges 100%. I think that across the board, women in technology in different industries and different countries face a lot of these similar challenges of being underestimated, being the only one, being talked over. There's a lot of microaggressions that happen, a lot of unconscious bias. I could keep going, but and then of course there are things that are like hyper local. And so for us, one of the really interesting things for me specifically as sort of the lead of our ambassador program is that seeing just the diversity in what women in Brazil are doing and what they're doing to bring their community together, and how that differs from what we're doing here in San Francisco, and then how that differs from what's happening in Singapore. And so I think that there's like these universal challenges, there's some universal wins as well. But there's also this like very local way that our ambassadors kind of take some of the content that we give them and bring it to their communities. And sometimes that looks like, hey, we're totally fine to have an event that's open to everyone. We want everyone to come and feel super comfortable. And in other communities and other cultures, it's like, hey, it's really important that this event only has women because we feel safe. We feel like we can share, et cetera. And so I think that that's the beauty of this program, is that we do sort of try and give resources based on what we know the challenges are. And it's always great also to hear back from ambassadors and be like, okay, you gave us this, but that's not what we need. What we actually need is, and you just get to learn a lot more.
It's not a one size fits all. I mean, the fact that you have so many ambassadors that can really take your program and make it super relevant to the local community is super important.
I think if I could just add, from my perspective, I think that's so valuable what community-based organizations like Women Techmakers can do on a global scale, because big multinational companies cannot meet the needs of local communities in the same way that a local developer can. But communities everywhere need opportunities, they need skills, they need training, they need the kinds of things that really work better as homegrown solutions to meet the needs of the community rather than somebody from the outside bringing it in. And that's why I am so proud to be part of this community-based opportunity, because I think really that's where the future lies in tech, is empowering communities to meet the needs of their own communities and help solve the problems of the world one community at a time.
Yeah, and I feel like that is so true. And I have ambassadors who will come to me and say, hey, can I do this? Can I do that? Can I, like, you gave us this, but can I actually do that thing? I'm like, yes, yes, yes. Like, you know what's best for your community, right? Like, I have lived in the United States my entire life. Like, my perspective on what's going to work for women in technology is really through my specific lens. And so we're really like leaning on our ambassadors also to provide that kind of hyper-local lens and perspective, and really empower them to say, you know what your community needs. Maybe your community needs to get more technical, like, and you just want to deliver like this really hard technical type of topics. Or maybe what your community is really dealing with is like a lack of confidence and feeling like we don't know how to speak up in meetings, and we need practice with that. And so we try and, again, provide kind of both of those opportunities. And the ambassador really is the one who gets to decide, okay, this is what my community needs right now.
Thank you. You talked about confidence, and that's a word we've used a little bit during this stream. I want to get back to that. We talk a lot about the imposter syndrome. Anyone who's trying to get into tech doesn't know a thing about coding, and all of a sudden, has to absorb huge amounts of coding information, feels that imposter syndrome at every point in time as they learn, as they search for a job. How is that? Is that a topic as well that is being discussed, talked about? You've talked about confidence. Is imposter syndrome something that is on the mind of women wanting to get in tech? And you personally, did that manifest itself as well in your journey? And how did it manifest? And how, I guess what I'm trying to ask is, how do you individually and as a community look at that issue of imposter syndrome, and how does it affect women maybe differently than others? And it's kind of an open question. Anyone who wants to go first?
I can go first, just to start off. So when I changed careers, of course, imposter syndrome affects everyone. It affected me too, because first of all, I felt like I was too old to be making a change. And I felt like, do women even belong in this space? Or am I going to have to be the token woman in every job that I ever tried to be in? Where was I going to find my tribe, so to speak? So that was definitely on my mind when I made that career change, thinking about how I would fit. One thing that was very, very validating to me, right after I finished the boot camp, I actually participated in a hackathon. It was a local hackathon. I was in San Diego at the time, and it was sponsored by Women Who Code for International Women's Day. So most of the participants there were women. With the mentors were women. And it was great to be in a technical environment where I was surrounded by all of these other women with different levels of technical skills. And to be able to feel like, yes, I do belong here. There are lots of women here that look like me. There are women in all kinds of technical roles, and we each have talents and skills that we can bring to the table. So I think that really made a big difference for me when I was starting out, was being part of a community that could help me feel like I belong and recognize that, we're all on the same journey together, and nobody needs to be alone or feel like an imposter.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that. I still have a lot of imposter syndrome working at Google every day. I felt like when I was at AT&T, I was just killing it, right? And it was super easy and anything away from anyone that works at AT&T. But when I got to Google, everyone was brilliant, right? And so it's like, oh my gosh, how did I get here? Like, I don't deserve to be here. I'm too scared to speak up in my meetings. And then after a while, it's like, no, I do deserve to be here. Nothing that's meant for me wouldn't be here for me. And there's a reason that I'm here. I interviewed for these roles. I killed my interviews. I was able to land this job on this team and multiple jobs since then while at the company. And I deserve to be here. My voice deserves to be heard. So it's making sure that I'm constantly going back in my mind and like reminding myself of like my self-worth and that I'm smart and that I'm competent and that I deserve to be in the room is super important. And then you asked if we were also, seeing that with other women, and Chryssa just told you she was kind of feeling the same way when she wanted to make that career move. But we see that so much in our community with our ambassadors, with our members. So that's why we try to make sure that the offerings that we give them help to solve those issues. Like, it's really good to have that community that you can go to, that safe space that you can build. Because like when I first got to Google as well, like a lot of times I was the only woman in the room, and even more so the only Black woman in the room. So it's like, how do I find my community within the company? So through employee resource groups, being in the Women Act group, being in the Black Googler Network group, and having a community to go and like talk about the issues with, but then problem solve with. And I think that's what we're doing with Women Techmakers as well. It's not, an employee resource group within Google, but it is an external community to help these women come together, talk about what the issues are, but then let's problem solve and to help you get better at whatever you're struggling with and to help you with your career and to become better leaders in the industry as a whole.
Yeah, I remember, to your point, Sequoyah, it's so funny. I hadn't thought about this for a while, but I remember a few of my first days at Google, we were doing training. Everybody was training. There was like 40 of us in the room. And the instructor asked a question and like everybody's hand goes up. And I was like, oh, wow. Like I'm with all of the top people in their class. Like a lot of people had gone to Ivy League schools. And I was like, oh, this is different. I haven't been in this intense of an environment before. And it was a great environment to learn and to be inspired, but it was also intimidating. And I think the thing specific, because I think Chryssa and Sequoyah did a great job sort of capturing the feeling of imposter syndrome and how that affects women in tech. And I would say the thing that I also think that's different for women specifically as well when we're experiencing this, not only just that we may be the only person in the room, but that it's a lot harder for you to say, I killed that. Like I to claim those accomplishments for yourself. It's hard because it's also the perception of a confident woman is going to be interpreted in a different way than if it was a man. And so I think that there's a lot of kind of challenges and barriers that women do have that relate to this idea of what does confidence look like and how do I express my confidence and how do I be confident but not overly confident so people think I'm too much or bossy or whatever those terms might be. And really, I think one of the things that we go back to with some of the programming that we do around confidence is just having that list of what are the things that you do really well, and how can you continue to like keep track of your accomplishments so that when you're having that low moment of like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing, you have all of this kind of fuel in your tank to say, no, I deserve to be here because of all of these things that I've done before.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing all that. What I take away from the program that I should have thought about, but it didn't strike me, really teaching those soft skills and pretty providing an environment to touch on a lot of different elements of getting into tech, which is not just you have to learn tech. It's all about building confidence, public speaking. I mean, you highlighted that, but it becomes obvious that's actually a huge benefit of joining the community. And it's not just tech; it's just women in industry and how to actually address the diversity and inclusion gap that you're seeing. I guess I don't know if there's women in other industries like women in hospitality or women in education, but I guess that's kind of universal. Uh, the audience is very quiet. I'm actually quite surprised. You really are um, drinking all the words that we have to say. But I just want to say hi to Abidine. Abidine. I hope I'm not pronouncing it wrong. Thank you for joining from Ottawa. So I know Google is a very, like, most big companies, very data driven, right? Very KPI centric. And if we can actually capture everything into a scorecard and see how we're making progress, we're going to be great. I come from Microsoft. It was exactly the same. And it's oftentimes the way to measure, effectiveness. I've struggled with evaluating how do you measure progress? Is there a KPI or scorecard that will tell you, hey, we're making progress in our mission to have more women accepted in tech? Like, how do you do that? How do you know that the impact that you're making? I mean, guessing obviously you have anecdotal evidence, right? And you're seeing it through your community, but how do you actually communicate that in a corporation? Yeah, I'll pause here.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that like any time that you're working in diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, you're representing underrepresented groups. And so one of the things that's never going to be our selling point is like super massive numbers, right? Yeah. Because by virtue of the fact that we're representing people who are underrepresented, our numbers, for however you want to sort of talk about it, are always going to be less than like tech overall. I think some of the things that we do try and look at, like obviously we are aware of global numbers of women in technology, and we want to do our part in sort of moving those numbers. I think that's a challenging needle to move because it's huge. We're at, about 20%, 25% globally. And so, that's ultimately, I would say, our North Star is like, let's push closer and closer to 50%. Some of the things specifically, I think that we like to look at within our community, and I'll speak to the ambassador community as well, is ensuring that ambassadors are being active, that they're like doing these activities in their community, because we need them, creating these events and these safe spaces, speaking publicly about technology and being a role model. But also that they're satisfied with what we're providing for them too. So I think that's kind of what we focus on, is their impact specifically in the community. And then are we also meeting their needs to do more of that and to get better at that?
That makes sense.
Yeah, I'd add on that a little bit. I mean, obviously, like Caitlin said, like the scale isn't going to be massive, but what we try to also focus on outside of like focusing on those ambassadors, but it's also like, what is their reach? Like, who are they reaching and what do those numbers look like? It's really hard for us to know how much we're actually shifting the industry, but as much as we can bring them into our program and make them to want to stay in the tech industry is what we're trying to solve for. As well as just we do a lot of storytelling of the women in our program. We really want to highlight their accomplishments, the work that they're doing, and like really put them front and center, so that, because you never know what video or blog post someone might write that will definitely change the way that they look at themselves or what they want to do. So we try to make sure we're highlighting those as well as much as we can. Leading
by example, and those role models that you've mentioned earlier, trying to provide as many role models as you can. Exactly. That makes sense.
I think the power of stories too. Chryssa, we're very excited we're very excited to share your story with our community. But I think that you never know when your story and your experience has the ability to like shift someone's life or change their path. And so that's something that we always encourage our ambassadors and just folks within our program, is to tell their story, because there are so many different ways and paths into technology. And I think it's so important that we see this like diverse group of incredible women doing awesome things in tech, and not one person looks exactly the same.
Thank you so much. There's one more question, and then I would like to close the stream on you making a recommendation to anyone. But let me actually get to that. Let's answer that question first, and then I'll close the stream with my own question. And I think you kind of answered that, but how much do you use tech skills at your job today? And do you need to keep learning new programming languages? And I'll ask Caitlin and Sequoyah. I think the answer is, I mean, if you've listened to the stream at the beginning, you'll know the answer. But that's actually the beauty of it. So how much tech skills do you use, Caitlin and Sequoyah, in your job?
It depends on what do you consider a tech skill.
Yeah.
Actually, what would you consider tech skill in your job?
I assume that question meant tech skills in coding, and that would be zero. But I think what we talked about earlier is like we're program managers, so like you can take that and transfer that skill anywhere. I think the main thing to do is to understand the technologies and the programs that you're supporting. And with that, we have to kind of understand high level what cloud is, high level what Android is, and AI, ML. But actually doing any like coding and being able to read code or write code is definitely not something that we do. But we can talk to those product managers and those engineers to be able to give those technical trainings to our communities. So it's being able to have those high level conversations that are really beneficial for our roles as program managers.
Yeah, and I'll add really quickly too, because I've talked to so many of our ambassadors who are coding every day. And one of the things that continually is brought up is that the most important skill to have is not a programming language, it's the ability to learn. Because for people that studied, went to school for engineering 5 years ago, it's so different from what the languages look like now. And so it's really about learning while you're on the job, recognizing that you're not going to know everything, and that you are going to have to learn as you go along, and also being adaptable and recognizing that like what may have worked a year ago is no longer relevant. And again, that's why I think people love tech so much, because it is constantly changing. It can be a little intimidating, but I think that's something that it's challenging and it's learning. And I think that's where people find a lot of satisfaction and value in that.
And Chryssa,
as a developer, I have to agree.
Did I represent you well, Chryssa?
Absolutely. I mean, I only have a few years under my belt now as a professional developer, and I've already had to learn many new languages after finishing my boot camp. And that really is the excitement of like you said, Caitlin, of being a developer, is being able to keep learning new things. There's no such thing as getting stale in this industry. It'll leave you behind. So being able to keep learning new things and having that openness and flexibility to try new things is really key to success, I think, as a developer.
Thank you so much. So we are a little bit over time, but I want to ask that one last question, if you don't mind. What would you like to tell the woman in the audience who's right now wondering if she should actually pursue a job in tech, and tech, big T? What would you like to tell that woman who's wondering, should I do it? How do I do it? And any one of you could actually start.
I can start. I mean, do it. Why not? Go for it. I think more than anything, and what I've learned along the way is like, if you're passionate about something or you just want to try it out and you're curious, like, why not go for it? It doesn't have to be your end all be all. One of my favorite quotes that I've seen is like, you're not a tree, you can move. So like, if you get in tech and you realize it's absolutely not for you, then you can switch careers and you can switch industries, and it's perfectly okay. You have one life to live. And if that's something that you're interested in doing, then take that leap of faith and go after it.
I would say that as we get, as we move further ahead in the economy and just the future, more and more of our work is going to be tech related. So I think it's never too late to learn technical skills, because as we move forward, we're all going to need those skills. So why not jump in now and get ahead of that game?
Yeah, absolutely echo what you both said. Just do it. Don't let ideas of what it means to be in tech hold you back. We need more women. We need more underrepresented groups in this industry. Diversity builds better products and outcomes for every single person. So definitely, if you're thinking about it, just try it. I would also say to the men in the audience as well, this is your call. Like, be an ally. We need you in this fight with us. This is not something, as I mentioned, we are only 20%-ish of this industry. And so we are not going to be able to do any of this on our own. And so this is your call. You know, you can be a part of our community, but you can also just be that ally for the other women and other underrepresented folks. You know, learn about what being an ally means and practice that in your life and in the tech space, because we truly do need everyone to help us build our mission where all women can thrive and where everyone can thrive truly in tech.
Yeah. Pass the mic.
Thank you so much. That was so inspiring. Caitlin, you have to send us postcard anywhere you go now. With pictures of the ambassadors that you meet in all those different countries. Sequoyah, Chryssa, Caitlin, thank you so much for taking the time. I know, Sequoyah, it was particularly late for you. Really appreciate that you did that. Thanks again. Thanks so much. You are available on LinkedIn. If anyone wants to follow up with you, I'm sure they can reach out to you. It starts with networking. Don't forget that. Thanks everyone who joined. Thank you for listening, and you've been great listeners today. It was interesting, but thank you so much again. Take care, and we won't be streaming next week, Thanksgiving week. So I wish everyone a good Thanksgiving. Take care, everyone.
Thanks.